tpblue.org/app.
Welcome to UFO Headline News with me, Heidi Hollis. Today is Monday, November 13th, 2017. You are listening to Inception Radio Network, the voice of the fringe majority. Today is my first day taking on UFO Headline News, and I am absolutely honored. Here is your UFO Headline News. A recent report. A UFO sighting in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota on October 31st, 2017. The witness states, I was working 3 miles south of town. I stopped working for a moment, walked to my pickup to grab a water while walking. I looked up at the sky because there was a large contrail from a jet engine plane. While looking at that, I noticed a shiny object flying just above the contrail. At first, I believed it was just another jet at a higher altitude. It wasn't moving at a speed that would suggest otherwise. After watching the object for a few minutes, I noticed it was a sphere, and it was much brighter than a plane reflecting sunlight. The object stopped flying east to west, hovered just above the contrail for approximately 5 minutes. Then suddenly went straight, vertical, for what I can only assume to be 2,000 to 3,000 feet. After reaching that altitude, the object hovered for a minute, around 10 more minutes, and then seemed to vanish. I did take a few photos, hoping to capture an image, which I did, but it is a cell phone quality, so the quality isn't that great. I did contact a friend during the event to see if he could see the object from where he was, and he could not. After that, I checked my photos, and to my relief, I captured one decent picture. To see that picture, go to Inception Radio Network and look up UFO Headline News. In another case, a UFO sighting in Cape Coral, Florida, on November 2nd, 2017. The witness explains, I am an ex-military pilot and know what an aircraft at high altitude on a clear night looks like. I also know what flares look like when viewed from a distance. What I saw when going out on the driveway of my house at approximately 8 p.m. Central Time, dark and cloudless sky with a full moon, looked like 2 very bright stars next to each other and stationary in the sky. These star-like objects were a good bit brighter than Venus. I obviously have never seen 2 stars that were this bright and positioned right next to each other. These objects were not blinking or changing color from their white star-like appearance. I viewed them for about 1 minute. After 1 full minute, both stars started to dim slowly until I could not see them anymore. From the time they were at full brightness until they could not be seen anymore took about 30 seconds. While they were dimming, they remained in their position in the sky. I have never in my life seen anything like this before. These 2 objects looked to be in outer space, such as you would see a star or Venus. In my opinion, they were not at a lower altitude where any aircraft would be. I feel so lucky that for the first time in my life, I am now 69 years old, that I have seen something that I am convinced is not anything from that can be explained as natural or man-made. I did not have a camera or a cell phone on my person, so unfortunately, I have no photos or video. Ron. Absolutely fascinating. All right. Next, we have a blast from the past as far as a UFO sighting is concerned. I found this, as well as the others, on UFOstalker.com. You could go to Inception Radio Network once again to find these listed. The witness states, the object flying from the west for east through the zenith, the field of view of about 15 degrees, 25 millimeter lens, the height of the sky about 75 degrees. This UFO sighting comes to us from Canberra, Australia, and this took place on December 31st, 1992. The witness states, "My wife and I were traveling by car from Sydney to Canberra on the 31st of December 92, intending to spend New Year's Eve with relatives in Canberra. It was a clear, sunny day at approximately 1:30 p.m. We were approximately 45 kilometers from there, and close to a vineyard called Lake George Winery. I negotiated a bend in the road and immediately saw an object in the sky some distance ahead at a low altitude. My first thoughts were that it was observing a head-on view of a Boeing 747. This aroused some concern, as I knew that the airport did not have a runway capable of handling a 747, and I could not understand why a 747 would be at such a low altitude. The road lapsed into several bends with some trees, and I lost sight of the object. After negotiating the bends, the road was then straight for a couple of kilometers. As soon as I came through the bends, we both regained our view of the object. Only then it was a full side view, and we both were astonished to see a rocket-shaped craft hovering at approximately 100 meters above some low hills to the north, with these hills in turn approximately 190 meters above the road we were on. I have calculated these measurements using Google Earth. That's pretty cool. I stopped the car and we got out and further observed the object. We were approximately 800 meters from the object. The object was a classical rocket shape, approximately 45 meters in length, approximately 6 meters in diameter, slightly tapering towards the rear. It was a gray color, and there was a single row of windows for nearly the full length. I do not recall the exact shape of the windows, only that they were there. There were no protrusions whatsoever on the outside of this object. There was a cloud of steam, like vapor, around the tail end of this object. No sign of pressure, more like steam from a parked steam locomotive. I had a camera recorder in the car, and I retrieved it. I attempted to take a movie of the object, and my camera would not switch on. Yet, I used it later in Canberra without a problem. Suddenly, the object just disappeared. 1 minute it was there, and then it disappeared. The cloud of steam like vapor stayed in the sky for a few more seconds before disappearing. Wow. That was fantastic. I've heard of these rocket-shaped craft before in the past, but it's not something that you hear about as often these days, so I find that to be totally, totally cool. Our next topic, we are going to Earth Sky News. That's coming to us from earthsky.org, and you can go to our site once again to gather these images and the stories. NASA's Juno spacecraft has successfully completed its 8th science flyby of Jupiter, passing over the gas giant swirling cloud tops once again as it continues to unravel the mysteries of the largest planet in the solar system. The mission itself also now has a new project manager who will oversee the continuing flow of information being sent back, which has already greatly expanded our knowledge of Jupiter, which upends some theories and presenting new questions. The new Juno project manager is Ed Hurst of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. He said on November 2nd, 2017, all the science collected during the flyby was carried in Juno's memory until yesterday, when Jupiter came out of solar conjunction, when the planet is behind the Sun from Earth. All science instruments and the spacecraft's JunoCam were operating, and the new data are now being transmitted to Earth and being delivered into the hands of our science team. The flyby occurred on October 24th, but the confirmation of its success was delayed until October 31st, Halloween, of course, by the solar conjunction, which interrupts communications between the spacecraft and Earth. You have got to see these breathtaking images, let me tell you. Unbelievable. Just looks like a masterpiece of art. Juno has been busy orbiting Jupiter since July 4th of 2016, using its instruments to study the planet's atmosphere, clouds, and auroras. At its closest, the spacecraft passes within 2,100 miles of Jupiter's cloud tops, providing unprecedented views of the turbulent atmosphere, which often looks like it was painted by a cosmic watercolor artist. That's just what I said. Hearst commented, "There is no more exciting place to be than in orbit around Jupiter, and no team I'd rather be with than the Juno team. Our spacecraft is in great shape, and the team is looking forward to many more flybys of the solar system's largest planet. Juno previously found that Jupiter's auroras seem to defy earthly laws of physics and are much more powerful than any Earth. The auroras have also been studied more recently by NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory. The data from Juno has also shown that Jupiter is more complex internally than previously thought, with current theories being turned on their heads." Juno's principal investigator, Scott Bolton, earlier told Wired, quote, "Almost nothing is as we anticipated, but it's exciting that Jupiter is so different than we assumed." Juno was first launched on October 5th, 2011, and is the first spacecraft to visit Jupiter since Galileo, which ended its mission on September 21st, 2003, by intentionally plummeting into Jupiter's atmosphere, much like the Cassini probe did at Saturn last September. Ed Hurst, Juno's new project manager, has worked on the mission since the beginning, and also worked on the Galileo, Stardust, and Genesis missions. He replaces Nick Nybakken, who was recently appointed Deputy Director at JPL's Office for Safety and Mission Success. Juno's next flyby of Jupiter will be on December 16th of this year, 2017. Bottom line, the new images and info from the Juno mission 8th science flyby of Jupiter are simply, absolutely amazing. Another story coming to us from earthsky.org is the star of the week, Arcanar. The ninth brightest star in all of the heavens is Achernar, which is a well-known sight to observers of the southern hemisphere, but known only by name to the great majority of observers in the northern hemisphere. It shines brightly with the magnitude of 0.45, in other words, as brightly as the brightest stars. But it is so far south on the dome of stars surrounding Earth that it never rises above the horizon from any location north of about 33 degrees north latitude. Follow the links below on the page that we will have highlighted on Inception to learn more about Achernar, sometimes called the end of the river. That's fascinating. How to see Achernar. For all practical purposes, you must be even further south, around 25 degrees north latitude, to see Achernar well. That is a line drawn around the entire globe, passing through Miami in the U.S. state of Florida and Taipei.
Hey, where are you going, Jim? The elevator's over here.
Taking the stairs.
But our meeting's up on 8.
Yeah, I know.
But that's 8 floors up. That's like 8 times 8. A lot of stairs.
That's the point. I've already lost a few pounds and earned almost $100 in wellness incentives.
Whoa, you're getting rewarded for working out?
Yeah, I know. I'm just as surprised as you are, Bob.
Fearless is full of surprises. That's the power of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Federal Employee Program. Learn more about our healthy benefits and sign up at fepblue.org/chooseblue by December 11th.
Hey, in China. Nowhere in North America has it easy seeing this star. For example, from Key West, Achenar rises only about 8 degrees above the southern horizon, even farther south from the southern tip of Hawaii's Big Island. Achenar never quite makes it to 14 degrees, and yet, if you are far enough south, you will see Achenar easily. After all, this star is very bright, just as Idranus marks the end of the river, so the river has a beginning. The star Beta Eridani, or Cursa, which itself is easily visible from the northern hemisphere, very near Orion's brightest star, Rigel. On most nights of the year, Achenar cannot be seen from anywhere in North America, but around October 20th, it skirts the southern horizon around midnight, never getting very high. Then as the months pass, it is seen earlier at night, around 10 p.m., in November at 8 p.m., in December just after sunset, in January. Being far to the south with no bright stars around it, Achenar stands out in its isolation. If you have a dark sky and are far enough south, you'll easily see Achenar's constellation Eridanus swelling up in a great loop under the constellation Orion. Achenar's history and mythology. This I love. The very name Achenar derives from the Arabic phrase meaning the end of the river. Didn't we just mention that? We did. Interestingly, in early classical times, the name Achenar was given to the star we now know as Theta Eridani or Achaemar. At that time, Achaemar was the brightest star in the constellation, visible from Greece, and thus was considered the river's end. When voyagers discovered the brighter star farther to the south, it became Achenar, and the former Achenar became Achaemar. Apparently, both names derive from the same phrase, al-Ahir al-Nahur, according to Richard Hinckley Allen, and mean the same thing. The science of Achenar. Data from the Hipparchus mission puts Achenar at about 144 light-years away. It is a B3V star, meaning it belongs to the ranks of normal stars, known as the main sequence, but it is much hotter and brighter than the Sun. In fact, it is nearly 1,100 times as bright, visually, as our neighborhood star. Brighter, hotter, and bluer than the Sun, Achenar produces more energy in the non-visible ultraviolet wavelengths. When you take this into consideration, it pumps out some 3,000 to as much as 5,000 times the solar energy level. The discrepancy is due to an uncertainty in the amount of UV radiation it produces. Achenar's mass is also 6 to 8 times that of our Sun, and its average diameter is nearly 8 to 10 times that of the Sun. But while our Sun spins on its axis once every 25 days, Achenar completes one rotation in slightly more than 2 days, or nearly 15 times faster than our Sun. This fast rotation produces an odd flattened shape, first discovered by the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope. Stands for VLT. in 2003. Up close, Achenar would look more like a blue M&M, while our sun would look more like an orange one. Read more about Achenar's flattened shape from ESO. This flattening of Achenar makes an exact surface temperature for this star hard to determine because the flattening actually causes the star's poles to be hotter than the equator, and they have essentially a blue M&M looking photo attached to this article. Absolutely mind-blowing and fascinating. Then finally, a look into the paranormal, because that's what I love to do. These stories come to us from thoughtco.com. Once again, we will have links to this on UFO Headline News. And this is the night of the mannequin driver. And this person reports, while hitchhiking one stormy night, David is offered a ride by a couple who look like department store dummies. The year was 1999, he states. I don't remember the month, but it was the beginning of cold, stormy weather. I was living with my parents in Tranquility, California at the time. I was partying with some friends in the town of San Joaquin, which is 8 miles away from Tranquility. We were having a good time, and as the party went past midnight, I got into a fight with a guy that was drunk and causing trouble. I had too much to drink as well, and after they broke us up, I decided it was time for me to go home. I had come to the party with a friend of mine. We came in his car, and when I went looking for him, I was told he took off earlier with someone, and he didn't tell anyone where he was going or when he was coming back. Well, I didn't want to stick around anymore, so I started getting ready to walk home using the main highway that connected the two towns. Others tried to persuade me to stay and wait for my friend to return, but in my state, my mind was made up. I remember it was a cold and windy night, and it wasn't the best decision for me to walk the 8 miles home alone. Holy smokes. When I figured I would hitchhike, and hopefully someone would give me a ride. I just wanted to get home and go to sleep, so I said my goodbyes and just started walking. It was around 1/3 of the way when I realized I made a mistake. I should have stayed and waited for my lame friend. That's when I saw some headlights coming towards me in the same direction I was walking. So I stuck my thumb out, and the car drove past me and kept going. Then another car came down the road and did the same thing. It was beginning to get very cold, and there was some flashing lightning. I was getting ready to turn back and go back when I saw another car coming down the road. So I stuck my thumb out, and it too drove past me. But as soon as it did, the brake lights came on, and it pulled over. I started running up to the car, relieved I was finally going to get a ride and get out of the cold. As I approached the car, the driver's door opened, and the driver got out. There was something totally wrong with the way he exited the vehicle. I mean, his body movements were sort of stiff and awkward. When I got closer, I started to say something when suddenly a bright lightning bolt flashed across the sky. It lit up everything, and I got a good glimpse of the driver. He looked like one of those mannequins you see in those big department stores. Ugh, yuck. A blank facial expression with a slight smile. And the way it was walking, man, I became so frightened. And then the passenger door opened and another occupant stepped out in the same awful manner. I could tell by its silhouette against the headlights shining down the road that it was a female. Another lightning bolt flashed, revealing she too was a dummy. I think I screamed, Then I ran into the cornfield that was next to the road. The corn was almost 6 feet tall and had recently been irrigated because I was running in mud that was up to my ankles. I just kept going, not stopping. I was tiring running through that mud, and just for a few minutes I did stop to catch my breath. In that moment, I could hear somewhere behind me the corn stalks being rustled. I was beginning to feel lightheaded and dizzy, like I was going to pass out. Then I heard car doors slamming shut, and the sound of the car driving away. I didn't go back to the highway. No way. I was way too scared. I kept plodding through the cornfield until I came out the other side. That's when I sort of collapsed. I was shaking all over. I stayed there for at least an hour before I headed back to San Joaquin. To this day, when I think back, it could have been someone playing a joke, just to scare people. I don't know. But they looked real to me. It was truly like a real nightmare. Ugh, can't imagine. Next one. I am not kidding. Random looking for ghost stories here, everybody. And this came up. Shadow Hat Man seemed to slow down time. Shadow people and the Hat Man are my specialty. What can I say? Bob has been seeing the Shadow Man in his apartment, but something weird happened when it passed by him. He states, I've been learning so much about shadow people. I never knew others have seen the same thing. I live in Coffeyville, Kansas. I moved to an apartment building built in the 1920s. It, along with the Midland Theater next door, are known for paranormal activity. I've lived here 12 years and met the Shadow Man soon after I moved in. At first, I'd see movement, but really never looked. As I started looking, when I first realized something was there, a dark shadow of a man would walk across the room along the east wall. I told friends about what I called the Shadow Man, not knowing that it was so widely known. It wears what I call a Dick Tracy type of hat. It's called a fedora. He wears a trench coat with a collar turned up. There are no details, just the definite dark shape. One time, I sensed this shadow coming from behind me and on my left. As I turned in my chair, my head and shoulders passed through the shadow. Time seemed to go in slow motion. What was 1 second seemed like 60. The shadow passed and on into the wall. I've never seen it again in that area of my apartment. I've never felt any fear. I had one experience that at first I didn't know what to think. The Shadow Man is always the same, never moves anything, just walks by. Well, I got up one morning and all my shoes and boots had been taken out of the closet and placed in a line, as if someone was stepping out of my bedroom. The Shadow Man, or a ghost, had to be playing tricks. I've been sad the last couple of years. A new company bought the building and did a big remodel, and for whatever reason, I don't see the shadow nearly as often as I used to. It's an amazing experience to witness and not be afraid, but thrilled. I've never tried to say one word and have never heard a sound. I can't tell you how happy I am to share my experience because the people who read it can relate. Wow. Okay. I have to make a comment to that. Some people don't have fear with this guy as long as he doesn't hurt them. And I find that to be interesting how some are so absolutely fascinated by this dark man that I now distinguish to be called the Hat Man. He is not a shadow person, but very different. Well, you guys, this is the conclusion of my very first UFO Headline News with me, Heidi Hollis. And remember, go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com, find UFO Headline News, and you will be able to get all of the links to everything that we discussed here today. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks for coming in, Mr. Mahoney. Do you have your member ID card?
Yep, I have it right here in the FEP Blue app, see?
Great.
It's awesome. The app can also help me find a provider and keep tabs on my deductibles.
Okay, can I...
Oh, yeah, and my out-of-pocket spending and visit limits, and I can call the nurse line.
I'm really glad it does all that, but I only need to see your member ID card.
Oh, that's it? Why didn't you say so?
Fearless is just one tap away. With the new FEP Blue app from Blue Cross and Blue Shield, you can access your health benefits on the go. Download it now at fepblue.org/app